Hello everybody and welcome along to Transfer Talk. Pep Guardiola faces the media in 30 minutes time, just days after revealing that Kyle Walker wants to leave. We will bring it to you live. Developments at AC Milan, who are expected to formally approach Manchester United over the signing of Marcus Rashford. Chelsea could be active with players departing the club. We'll get an update from Enzo Maresca. And Arsenal's issues in front of goal continued once again. Do the club have to act sooner rather than later and sign a striker? Afternoon to you all at home, and of course it's a very good afternoon to Kevin Hatcher. The Oracle is back as it's a Monday. Molly Stevens, Flex, and Kofi Fari as well. And we're going to start with some breaking news that has just come in concerning Aston Villa, and that is that they have agreed a deal with Borussia Dortmund to sign the forward Donyell Malen. We are awaiting further information, but Sky Germany are reporting the fees around about £20 million. You'll also remember that Ipswich are trying to sign Jadon Philogene from Villa, and that one we are hearing is getting closer. Let's concentrate on Malen, though. How good a signing will this be for Villa?
It could be very good, because Unai Emery, I think, has shown he can get the best out of players. He will look at Marlen's speed, the way he's direct, the way that he has good instincts in front of goal, and think there's something there to work with. The one thing you'd say, if you look at his whole spell at Borussia Dortmund, is he's been very inconsistent. When he's been good, he's been outstanding. He's been on long streaks of scoring in games, but then he disappears for a few weeks. So that's the big challenge, I think, for Unai Emery, to get Malen to perform at a high level on a more consistent basis.
I suppose they've been trying to replace Moussa Diaby for a while, haven't they? Is that how you sort of see him fitting in?
Yeah, he's direct. He's got that pace. He can run in behind. I think he's slightly different to Diaby in some ways, but I do think he's the kind of player that, if you look at Ollie Watkins, for example, I wouldn't necessarily say they're like for like, but Watkins' ability to run in behind, that pace that he has, the way that Emery has made him much more consistent in terms of scoring goals. I know this season's been a bit up and down, but I think Malen would want to get to that level. This is the time for him to kick on. I think the Netherlands have been waiting for it. I think Dortmund waited for it, and it never quite happened. So a good player. The question is now, can he become a great player?
Yeah, OK. Good news for Villa fans. Donyell Malen, we are hearing, is going to be through the door. Now, let's get to developments involving Marcus Rashford. AC Milan are expected to formally approach Manchester United over the signing of the forward. So far, Flex, it has all just been hearsay, really, and an interest, but now we're hearing there might be a formal approach. When you look at all the options that we've heard in terms of interest, a bit from Italy, Como potentially interested, Dortmund have shown interest, West Ham in the Premier League. When you look at all those options, is this starting to look the likeliest and best fit for everyone?
Yeah, I think so. In my opinion, when I've started to look at some of the clubs that have been involved in potentially signing Marcus Rashford on loan in this window, AC Milan was the one that stood out to me as a fan and sort of looking at it from an economical perspective as well. Of course, there are a lot of clubs who can't afford to take Marcus Rashford, which was always going to limit the amount of options he was going to have during this window. And Manchester United were always going to have to look at just how much they would probably have to subsidise in his wages, at least until the end of the season, with Marcus Rashford on a reported £300 a week? £300,000 a week. A little bit more than 300 quid a week.
Making a fortune.
But the way he's been playing, you know. But £300,000 a week, yes. There's not many clubs who can subsidise that, and Manchester United would have to fork out probably at least, as a minimum, half of that. And AC Milan, I think, are one of the teams, I mean, Kev can enlighten us more, who probably could. I know that Alvaro Morata is their top earner, around £160,000 a week or euros a week. So that would probably work out for them. And in terms of the stature of the club and the project, I saw some quotes from Zlatan Ibrahimovic saying, you know, we don't need to convince players to come here. Everybody wants to come to Milan, but obviously he's got his role there. But they are a huge club. And, you know, you look at Tomori there, you look at Ruben Loftus-Cheek there, Tammy Abraham's there, some English lads there that Rashford could, you know, get acquainted with and get his feet under the carpet. And some really good players there. So I think that could work for Rashford.
I'm glad you mentioned those English players. So that brings me neatly onto my next question. Just explain to us the EU rules concerning non-EU players and how they affect Italian sides in particular.
So this is to do with the FIGC, which is basically the Italian league authority, and this is good old Brexit affecting things because obviously English players are no longer EU players, so they now come under that category. They've already got Strahini Pavlovic, who they brought in, Emerson Royale, who they brought in. They've taken up 2 non-EU slots. However, to kind of soften the blow, there was an adjustment made to the rules whereby you can sign a bonus player from Britain or from Albania. So they've looked at non-EU countries and said, OK, you can sign an extra player, but you can't sign 2. So the situation that Milan are in is if they went for Marcus Rashford, that's fine, but they couldn't then go for Kyle Walker in the same window. So they would have to make a decision between who to pursue.
And we are hearing that Rashford is the priority for AC Milan, not Kyle Walker. So speaking of Walker, how does that affect his future? Where else could he go? I've seen reports of Inter Milan, possibly in the sun.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in the, the Inter are always aware of opportunities. They're very, very good at that, at reacting quickly to that kind of thing. His ability to play as a wide centre-back or play as a full-back or a wing-back ties in perfectly with what they do. So that is a move that would make sense. Bayern were linked with him very, very strongly. I feel like that's passed now because they've got options in that right-back position. They're hopeful that Sacha Boey can put his injury problems behind him. So maybe Inter is an option. Just on the Rashford thing, it's really interesting to me, this, because Rafa Leao is absolutely the top player in the position on the left-hand side. And then you look through the middle, Tammy Abraham just got the winner in the Super Cup final against Inter. They've got Morata, but maybe they feel if they're going to push up the league and push for the Champions League, they need that strength in depth.
Yeah, if he goes there, it'd be fascinating to see if he can force his way into the side. It's not a given, is it? How about some other City targets? I mean, obviously, Walker's probably going the other way, but Omar Marmoush, that's the big one, isn't it, that we've been leading on for the last few days. How confident are you that City will get their man, and how much do you think it's going to cost?
Yeah, I think this will happen, and the reason I think it will happen is because City are prepared to pay what Frankfurt want. We spoke last week, didn't we, about they were calm at the moment, Frankfurt, because they didn't really want to let him go in this window. But if somebody gets to around €80 million, which is the kind of figure they want, maybe that could happen. City seem determined to get him. I can see why, because you look at the void that's been left since Julian Alvarez went to Atletico Madrid. Well, here's a guy that can play as a second striker, can play wide, can play through the middle, has incredible pace, incredible skill, strikes the ball beautifully. Yeah. The only caveat would be he's made a massive leap this season. I mean, he's been involved in 21 Bundesliga goals now.
Amazing.
If you look at his previous seasons at places like Wolfsburg and Stuttgart, he hadn't quite hit that level. Players blossom in different ways at different times. So that would be the only caveat, but he's a very talented player.
Oh, you see that he scored actually on the weekend, and I was working. It was looked like a simple finish, but the way he just sort of shifted it and then struck it straight into the net, he looks like he's a really good finisher. Abdul Qadir Husanov, that's how we pronounce it, isn't it? It's a silent K, Husanov. Lawns have accepted £33.5 million plus add-ons for Husanov. He was left out of the side, of the Lens side, on the weekend. So that looks like that is going to happen very, very shortly. When he comes in, they've had defensive problems, Man City. Are you expecting him to be a regular starter, looking at who he's competing against?
I'm expecting him to compete. And if you look at the problems they've had defensively, you can understand why they'd want to bring somebody in. But they do seem to be looking to, as Pep Guardiola says, you have to shake that squad up every so often, and that's what they're doing. Because this is a guy you bring in, potentially he could be a City player for the next 5, 6, 7 years. He's only 20, super aggressive, does the defensive basics incredibly well, good in the air, loves a tackle. The stuff on the ball, I think, can improve and will improve, but that's an area that I think he can work on. But in terms of his physical attributes, in terms of his athleticism, his pace, it's all there. So he has all the basics to compete in the Premier League, no doubt about it.
All right, Man City are making moves already, aren't they, in this January transfer window? We'll keep you posted. How about West Ham? They've got a new manager in Graham Potter, of course. We will be hearing from him later. He's going to speak to the media. Jeremy Langdon will be there for us. We can talk to Jeremy right now. Hi there, Jeremy. Thanks very much for chatting. What's the latest then with Nicholas Füllkrug? It's another injury for West Ham. Could this latest setback force them into the market to sign a forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. It doesn't look good, does it, with Füllkrug, who, of course, came off on 15 minutes on Friday night. He was running really quickly and he pulled up really quickly. It looks like a serious hamstring tear. And we're thinking maybe up to 12 weeks. We'll have to wait and see and check with Graham Potter later on. But it's not just Füllkrug because, of course, Somerville came off at half-time. That seemed more precautionary. That's a hamstring as well. And, of course, there's no Antonio, there's no Bowen. There's massive problems now for West Ham in attack. And big pressure on Danny Ings, who at the age of 32 has only started one Premier League game all season and has only got one goal. But that goal did come against Fulham, who West Ham play tomorrow night. It's Graham Potter's first home game, but of course, big injury problems. And we'll be asking him about the search for a new striker, possibly when he arrives here at 1:30.
And Potter's only had one game in a few days with the squad. This is going to be a very interesting game for many reasons against Fulham.
Absolutely. This is only the third training session that Potter's had with his new players. They're training right now here at Rush Green near Romford. They trained on Sunday. He had one training session with them on Friday. He's hardly had any time to work with West Ham. And Fulham caused West Ham problems last season. They won twice. Earlier this season at the Cottage, it was 1-1. Ings had to come off the bench and save West Ham with an equaliser on 90 minutes. So Fulham have been causing West Ham problems. But West Ham's problems aren't just in attack. They've let in 39 goals in the Premier League. They've slumped to 14th. Only 6 wins so far. They're only 7 points off the relegation places, and the pressure is on with these 2 home games upcoming for West Ham. Fulham tomorrow night and then Palace at the weekend. Graham Potter in this room at 1:30.
Great stuff. Look forward to it. Thank you, Jeremy. Right, let's have a quick word on West Ham then. Quaker, they've got this new shiny manager who's come in. They want to play attractive football. They've now got their forward line decimated. Bowen's out, Antonio's out, Füllkrug is out. Surely they need to dip into the market and help the new manager out so he's got a few more tools to play with.
Yeah, and I believe that Graham Potter will be part of that process in terms of bringing in a striker. We know how big of a role Tim Stuyton plays there in terms of their recruitment. And if you think back to Graham Potter's time at Chelsea, he joined right after the transfer window closed. But in regards to West Ham, it seems like they're cursed when it comes to number 9s. Think about Scamacca's struggles at West Ham in terms of poor form as well as injuries, and it's reminiscent of what we're seeing now of Nicholas Füllkrug. It was surprising when they brought in Füllkrug in the summer in terms of the player profile. When you look at the exciting players they brought in, the likes of Somerville, the likes of Todibo, and Füllkrug was a bit of an outlier, and we've seen him struggle this season with injuries. But West Ham do need full players. Mikel Antonio's out for an extended period of time. Somerville's now out of an injury. Jared Bowen suffered injuries, and Jeremy said it there. West Ham, they need help in the forward lines because when we remember West Ham last season, it of course wasn't a vintage season, but they could put the ball in the back of the net and had a player, Mikel Antonio, who was willing to make the runs that players in this team aren't capable of doing. So they need to bring in a striker. And when you look at the landscape, it's difficult because there are so many teams that need front men right now, and there's a dearth of talent when it comes to players that can lead the line for a Premier League side. If you look at a player like Evan Ferguson, who's currently out of favour at Brighton, we remember how good he was a couple of years ago. He's out of favour with Hertzler, and I think he's a player that, if West Ham are exploring the market for a number 9, he's a player that definitely could lead the line for West Ham.
What do you reckon? Ferguson, do you agree with that? Are there any other names that come to mind?
That's the problem, though, isn't it? That's the problem. Where are the strikers? Who is the right striker? I think Marcus Rashford. I know West Ham.
It's the only Premier League club that so far has been associated with Rashford.
I could have seen that working in many cases. I think clearly, Marcus Rashford has got his sights on leaving the UK, and I can understand why. But also Thomas Tuchel being back in in the England manager's job, I think it could have been good to see Marcus Rashford play in England as far as his England career is concerned. Could have been a good statement signing as well for Graham Potter, show him a bit of love and let him be the front man at West Ham. But I agree completely with Kweku. Even before Nicholas Füllkrug's injury on the weekend, they needed to strengthen up top. Scoring goals has to be Graham Potter's focus. Under Julen Lopetegui, they only scored 24 times in 20 Premier League games. That's just not good enough when it comes to the Premier League. And I just think number 9, there's plenty of talent around that number 9 position, but they've been so unfortunate with injuries that strengthening up top is the priority for Graham Potter.
Interesting times at West Ham. What are they going to do? We will find out. And what kind of style will they play under Graham Potter? Next, though, we're going to have the latest on Chelsea, because their boss, Enzo Maresca, he's been very open. He's been very honest, actually. You want to hear his comments on Ben Chilwell, even, in particular. And we're also going to get an update on the future of Carney Chukwuemeka and Renato Vega. Stay with us.
man, Juninho.
Brilliant skill by Juninho.
Samba boys, we used to call them, didn't we?
He is without doubt the greatest player to pull on a red and white shirt.
You need the real quality to stay in the Premiership. And I just saw these two Brazilians who I thought, wow. And it was Juninho and Roberto Carlos.
Well, this really is an earth-shattering moment. A relatively small club in the Premier League can attract Brazil's number 10.
There was 5,000 people waiting for me, so the reception was fantastic.
We had to use a special microphone because it was so noisy.
I felt home since I first came.
He took on the Teesside way of life.
It was a joy to work with.
My relationship with the club is really special. That's why they still in my heart forever.
And what an iconic transfer that was. You can catch the latest Transfer 360 featuring Juninho from 11:30 tomorrow on Sky Sports News. Now, Bournemouth could be forced into the market after a series of serious injuries. Let's speak to our reporter, Mark McAdam, who will be with Anthony Iraola later. Hello, Mark. Let's tap into those injuries then. A couple of pretty serious ones to forwards, and Max Aarons is an outgoing. So do you expect Bournemouth to be fairly busy this January?
They'll be busy in one respect, probably just trying to trim the squad. Let's start with the outgoing. We know that Philip Billing has joined Napoli. That's a player they won't have for the remainder of the season. And Max Aarons is heading to Spain after the two clubs, Valencia and Bournemouth, agreed a loan deal, which potentially could turn into a permanent transfer move for £7.5 million. So they've lost a midfielder and a right back. But every single Bournemouth fan I speak to at the moment is saying to me, what's happening with strikers? Are we signing a number 9? Are we going into the market? And that'll be the first question I ask Donyell Malen in today's press conference, which is happening at 1 o'clock. As you can see, I'm here at the Vitality Stadium. Now, his answer to me will probably be, well, Mark, we scored 5 goals in the FA Cup at the weekend without a recognised striker. Yes, it was against a Championship side, but a Championship side in West Brom that are currently 6th. So therefore, we've actually got good strength in depth. Even though we have serious problems to our number 9s, we're actually quite comfortable with what we've got. We know that Dango Ouattara, who played as a 9 at the weekend, who scored a couple of goals, can fill in that role. You've also got Anton Semenyo, who can play as a number 9. He used to do it at Bristol City. And you've got the likes of Justin Kluivert, who can also play as a 9, and Daniel Jebison, who they recalled from Watford as well, who scored at the weekend, who can play in that role. So Anthony Iraola will probably say, look, I haven't got a number 9, yes, but I have got a number of players that are more than capable of playing in that role. But my understanding is that whilst they're not desperately looking to try and sign a striker in this window, they are monitoring the market, they are looking what's out there, and just seeing if there is a player that would fit the right type of profile. The last thing Bournemouth want to do is go into the market, spend 10, 15, 20, 25 million pounds on a new striker for Eva Nilsson, their record signing, to come back in 6 to 8 weeks' time. Then they've got a problem where they've got 2 top-class strikers probably earning huge sums of money, one of which is going to be on the bench week in, week out, which will cause a problem in itself. So not only will we get the very latest with regards to transfer news when we speak to Andoni, we'll also get his thoughts ahead of the Chelsea game. We know that Bournemouth have been one of the surprise packages in the Premier League this season. They've been absolutely outstanding. They've beaten Arsenal, Manchester City. They've gone toe-to-toe with some of the big boys in the Premier League. And there's no question this could be one of the seasons to remember. Be interesting to see the dynamic of what happens between now and deadline day, because they won't want this season to end in disappointment because of the activity they didn't do in January as opposed to the work they did do. So not only will we get the latest on that, obviously we'll talk about the game midweek with Chelsea when they travel to the Bridge, and we'll get the latest with regards to injury news as well. Ryan Christie and Lewis Cook, a couple of players with question marks, but hopefully they'll be back in action this week. All of that from 1 o'clock on Sky Sports News.
Top man. Thank you, Mark. Right, still to come, Enzo Maresca on Chelsea departures, and we will hear live from Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola. Will he have an update on the future of Kyle Walker? Stay tuned.
Why hasn't it worked?
Because it's my choice, and the reason why I said probably because I can see Malo Gusto or Rhys James or Cucurella doing different kind of job during the game, and I think Chilwell is top fullback, probably doing that kind of job up and down, and give him the opportunity in the past to win titles, to be with the international team. But I struggle to see Ben doing different kind of things.
Really interesting, isn't that? Maresca, he's been quite honest, hasn't he, and brutal at times with Ben Chilwell. Just remind ourselves what he said there. He did say he was ashamed of the way that he had treated Chilwell in some ways, or the club had treated him. And he said, Ben is a top fullback going up and down, but I struggle to see him doing other things compared to Malo Gusto, Rhys James and Marc Cucurella. It's kind of interesting because they're trying to sell Ben Chilwell, but at the same time, they're sort of denigrating him as a fullback.
Yeah, the Chilwell conundrum continues. He's a player that, of course, is very talented. At his best, with Rhys James dovetailing on the other side, they were two of the best fullbacks in the Premier League. Maresca in the summer was asked about Ben Chilwell. Effectively said he was surplus to requirements. The window closed, Chelsea couldn't move him. And then Maresca reneged on that and said he's willing to welcome him back into the fold. That hasn't really materialised. He's only played one game this season for Chelsea, and that was coming off the bench in the League Cup. And so he's a player that needs to find a club where he's going to play regular football. And effectively what Maresca was saying there is that he doesn't believe that Ben Chilwell can invert. And that's what he asked his fullbacks to do in Rhys James, in Malo Gusto, in Marc Cucurella. And so if he doesn't believe that he's fit for purpose in terms of what he's trying to do at Chelsea, then it makes sense for him to try and find a move. For Ben Chilwell, it's important to play regular football because there is an opportunity, I've said it before, for him to make it back into this England side. We look at the position on the left-hand side of that defence. You see Lewis Hall coming into the fold. If Ben Chilwell goes and plays regular football, he can find his way back into Thomas Tuchel's England side. But it's clear from what Maresca said there that Ben Chilwell's not in his long-term plans.
Yeah, but Flex, I mean, is that not what most managers want your fullback to do now? They want you to invert. So where does that leave Ben Chilwell? You know, how much has his stock dropped? What kind of clubs might come in for him?
Well, his stock's dropped dramatically from where he was under Thomas Tuchel and winning the Champions League, and from where he was even before that, doing really well at Leicester. That initially got him the move to Chelsea. His stock's definitely fallen, and yes, there's new demands of the games and different types of fullbacks that different managers want. But Ben Chilwell is a very experienced player. He's had a lot of problems with injuries. That hasn't helped as well, spending long parts out of the game. But in terms of teams that could be looking at him, I think a lot of Premier League outfits would. It would be a concern, obviously, with how fit he could be at the demands of the Premier League. But there's probably enough sample size there to know that if you can get him fit, and more importantly, get his confidence up. He hasn't been playing a long time, similar to when we were talking about the Calvin Phillips conundrum, which is still kind of going on. But he needs a move. He needs to get out of that environment. It hasn't worked out. He's probably going to need a manager to put an arm around him. And I think you mentioned, Quaker, on different shows, West Ham is an interesting proposition. You look at Aaron Cresswell as a senior pro there. Aaron Wan-Bissaka can fill in there, etc., etc. But Ben Chilwell could be a really interesting proposition for Graham Potter. It'll be interesting to see what West Ham fans feel about that. But I definitely think there's a place for him in the Premier League. But it has to be the right club in the right moment with the right manager.
Yeah, playing the style of football that suits him.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to agree with you. I think West Ham, we seem to be talking about them a lot, actually, and what Graham Potter could do. But I think Ben Chilwell, again, a bit like the Marcus Rashford situation, needs to be shown some love from someone. And I think Graham Potter could be that man, a traditional fullback, who stays out wide but making those constant runs, attacking and defensively.
Molly, sorry to interrupt, but Pep Guardiola has just walked out to talk to the media. Let's hear from him now and hear what he's got to say on Kyle Walker, amongst other things.
Right back, Rico. I said what I said. I don't going to add anything else. I don't have any news, so he's Brentford in my mind.
It was more to do with your squad and who plays in that position. But I take your point. You've won your last 3 games. You said before that you're not back. How far away are you? Do you think you've made progress over those 3 games?
Well, of course, we won 3 games. Before it was impossible to win 1. So now we won 3. and that helped us. But the reality is, we won a team the last game, for the difference of the Premier League and League One and the budget for both teams, and for many reasons we should win. We did it quite well, but still we have to wait to see if we are, who we are. But of course the mood is better, and of course tomorrow we have a enormous difficult game. What happened in the last seasons. Always the team with Thomas create a lot of problems. They are a fantastic team, but at the same time, we know that we are worth playing for.
Sure. Hi Pep. Only Liverpool have a better home record than Brentford. What makes them so difficult, particularly at home?
A long time with Frank, with Thomas, and they, in set pieces, in the high pressing, are so aggressive. When defend deep, they are so compact, but really tight. And the transitions are really dangerous. So it's many years already in the Premier League, doing really well. So that's the reason why the last game was not maybe the best results they had at home, but the trajectories in the last years have been really good.
He's obviously done a very good job at Brentford. With respect to Brentford, do you think he could do well at a bigger club?
Who?
Thomas.
Yeah, I said in the home game this season. I had the feeling that he's so happy there, he's comfortable, but I had the feeling all the time that sooner or later he will be appointed with a team, to fight for the higher targets, and he will do it really well.
Okay. In the middle there, please, Alex.
Hi Pep. Since we last spoke, the club's agreed a fee with Lens for Abdulkadir Kusanov. What is it about him as a player that you like and want to bring in here?
The club didn't announce anything.
No, but the fee's been agreed with Lens for the player.
I don't know.
How many arrivals are you expecting as we sit here today, this month?
I don't know. What I expect for the beginning of the season, the team, the squad will start back. I don't know, Rod is impossible. It's the only one. The other one's back. Is what I wanted. If it would happen, we have not gone to the transfer window this season. Absolutely not. And we will not be in the position that we are. But we struggle all the season. People say Rodri. It's not just Rodri. We had a lot of problems, especially in back four. Still we have. And that is the reason why the club is thinking, what are we going to do this transfer or maybe in the summer?
And again, the development since I last spoke to you about this is that obviously what's happened with Kyle and potentially leaving. Does that mean that defensive reinforcements for you become the priority this month?
When we are from the beginning of the season, it was the back in the middle, yeah. Yeah, there's a position up front. We are more or less okay. But back all the season we struggle a lot. Yeah.
Set the embargo for 10:30 this evening. Somewhere to start.
Hi Pep, you're obviously
okay. Very interesting to hear from Pep Guardiola. They're just sparring a little bit with Ben Ransom. He didn't want to give too much away, but it was interesting what he said there. He said that the back and the middle was what we were targeting. We feel okay in forward positions, but very tight-lipped on Kyle Walker, and he wouldn't give us anything on Kusanov either. Let's get back to Chelsea, though, guys. And Kevin, Dortmund interested in two Chelsea players. First of all, Renato Vega. How strong is that interest?
Well, I can understand why it's strong, because I was in Dortmund on Friday and they had a defensive crisis. They had a flu bug that ripped through the camp. No Emre Can, no Rami Bensebaini, no Nico Schlotterbeck, Niklas Zula already injured. And so they had to play two players who'd never started in the Bundesliga before, two youngsters who'd been promoted. And Julian Reasson, who's a fullback and a very good fullback, we found out is not a great centre-back. So they need somebody like Renato Vega who can cover multiple positions. That's what they're looking for, somebody who can play left-back, but somebody who can play centre-back. And if they could do a loan like that, that would make a huge amount of sense for them, at least for the rest of this season. He's played in the Bundesliga before. He had a short spell with Augsburg.
What about Carney Chukwuemeka? Why are they interested in him?
So that was a name that I did hear on Friday when I went speaking to people, and they're looking for a central midfielder who can get forward, who could be dynamic. They want to strengthen that position, and they see him again as somebody they could bring in on loan, give some minutes to. He's desperate for minutes. And they've got a lot of games coming up because they've got to fight their way back into Champions League contention in the Bundesliga, but they're still going very well in the Champions League, and they expect to go quite far in that competition.
OK, we'll keep you posted. Dortmund interested in 2 Chelsea players. Now, coming up, news of a potential departure at Manchester United. Plus, Kevin is going to tell us about more European players that could be on the move this January. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. In a moment, we're going to get Kevin's ones to watch in Europe who could be on the move. We've got some big players in there, but we're going to just tie up a few loose ends with Manchester United first, guys. And Anthony Flex, we are hearing that Real, Betis and Olympiacos now have made inquiries. If Manchester United can make a sell, is this one they'd want to make fairly quickly? Because he's a player that they can get a decent fee for, and then that, of course, gives them more options in terms of bringing people in for Amorim.
Yeah, I think ideally that would absolutely be a good solution for Manchester United and Anthony, as that move just, to put it quite frankly, just really hasn't worked. He has no confidence at the moment. He's not getting any game time from Ruben Amorim. And even being brought in by Erik ten Hag, and Erik ten Hag stuck by him for a very long time. He ended up losing his place even under Erik ten Hag, so he's had a really, really tough time at Manchester United. And again, we keep finding Manchester United in positions whereby they have players on huge sums of money. Anthony reportedly on, in excess of £200,000 a week. Again, in Europe, in January, it's very, very difficult to secure permanent moves, or again, without Manchester United subsidising a large part of that. But I think Ruben Amorim has made it clear that Anthony's probably not going to be in his immediate plans, and I think if the right offer comes in for Anthony that suits both the player and the club, I'm almost certain that Manchester United would accept it.
Yeah, we heard about the Olympiacos interest a few days ago, actually, but what about Real Betis? Why do they want Anthony?
Well, I'd be surprised if they could do anything permanent. I think it would probably have to be a loan and probably, as Flex suggests, probably subsidised to some extent. But they're not scoring enough goals for a start. And I think there is a vacancy on the right-hand side of that team. Pablo Fornals, the former West Ham player, has played a lot of games in that position, hasn't maybe been as consistent as they'd have liked him to be. And I think he is the kind of dynamic player that can make a difference. I know people will laugh at that because they'll say he hasn't made an impact at all at Manchester United. But you take it back to the guy that didn't just play really well in the Eredivisie for Ajax, but also in the Champions League. I think that was the reason many people, including myself, thought this would work, because he'd done it at a higher level in the Champions League. So for Betis, if they could bring him in on loan, give them a boost, get a few more goals in, creative-wise, I think that would help.
Manchester United are about to make a signing. We are hearing Diego Leon, 17-year-old left wing-back from Paraguay, plays for Cerro Porteño in Paraguay. He's having a medical today ahead of finalising a pre-contract agreement for the summer. That looks like that's one for the future, probably 2, 3, 4 years' time. But, Molly, do you expect that to not be the only left wing-back that Manchester United sign this January?
I'd be amazed if it was. I mean, Ruben Amorim's style of play, that 3-4-3 setup, they need high-energy wing-backs, quite frankly. I think, both ends of the pitch. Diogo Dalot did a good job, in fairness, against Liverpool at Anfield, but I can't see him occupying that position on a full-time basis. Ahmad will return to right wing-back on a longer-term basis as well. So I think creativity on the left is badly needed, and that's not going to be satisfied for Ruben Amorim in just one player.
Yeah, there's possible interest in Nuno Mendes from PSG as well. So anything happens there, we will let you know. Right, in terms of players from Europe who could be on the move, Mr. Hatchard has picked out a few names for us. Let's go through them then. One of the biggest names, Kavica Kvaratskhelia. What an exciting player he is. The noises seem to be that he might be going to PSG. Is there a chance that he might end up at Liverpool, or another Premier League club could come in for him, do you think?
I feel like PSG are in pole position. I feel like this is a deal they've wanted to do for a long time. They've been interested in him since he helped them win the Scudetto, when he was dubbed Kvaradona, when he had that incredible season with Napoli. And it's worth remembering that he came from Dinamo Batumi, and nobody expected him to have the kind of leap that he's had. He's been incredible. And even though they didn't have a great title defence, I actually thought he played quite well. But the issue is he hasn't improved his contract. They haven't perhaps rewarded him in the way that he expected. Aurelio De Laurentiis has been quite stubborn about that. And Antonio Conte has come out publicly and said he wants to go. I'm not going to stand in his way. And it gives Conte potentially the opportunity to reshape the squad in the way that he wants. So a very, very good player. I'll be interested to see how he does in Paris, because Bradley Barcola is on that left-hand side. So I think there'd be a rejig there. But I think he's the kind of signing that could give Paris a real push, I think.
How about Randall Kolo Muani? It's a name that's popped up a few times already in this window. We're hearing Manchester United and Spurs have shown interest. But Juventus seems to be quite confident about getting over the line. Are they in pole position?
Well, that's the link that has been the most enduring one. That seems to be, from the reporting in France and Italy, the move that Kolo Muani himself is really interested in making. I think they need another forward. Juventus, no doubt about that. I think there's too much reliance on Vlahovic. I think as well, they're not winning enough games. Too many draws for Juventus. So he's the kind of dynamic player that I think could get them winning a few more games. So I think he'll certainly leave Paris. It's just a question of where.
Why don't Arsenal go in for him?
Yeah, I think they should, personally. I think, you know, we talked about him last week, didn't we, about what he could bring to a team. He could play through the middle, he could play wide, so he could play on that right-hand side in place of Saka. And I'm really surprised that Arsenal haven't even explored it, or at least we don't know that at this stage.
Might done. Is that the question you were going to ask?
I was just going to ask, in terms of Colin Moani, we've heard a lot about him being multifaceted. He can play in multiple positions. For Arsenal, I think what they're crying out for is a definitive striker and a defensive player who can play on the left-hand side in terms of their strongest lineup. What is Colin Moani's best position? Because we've seen him play in multiple positions, not just for France, but also for PSG.
I think if you look at the way that he plays, there's a lot of movement across the line anyway. And I think even when he's played up front for Eintracht Frankfurt, for example, a lot of that was moving into wide areas as well. So he's not a focal point per se. You wouldn't just shove him up there and, you know, expect him to just kind of lead that line in that way. But I just think he's a top player. And I think at Paris it hasn't worked out. Luis Enrique doesn't fancy him. And so he needs a move, but I still believe the talent is absolutely there.
What about Dani Olmo? Because it's kind of player, if he's available, you would think almost every big club in the world is going to try and get him. Is he definitely staying at Barcelona now? Is that all sorted out, or is there a glimmer of hope? Is the door slightly open?
The door isn't open because, but it's one to keep an eye on. The reason it's one to keep an eye on. So, as we spoke last week, Barcelona was still trying to get his registration sorted. What has happened is they went to the courts and the court said no. They went to the Spanish Federation and they went to La Liga. They said no. So they think, who else can we go to? So they went to the Spanish government. They went to the top sports court in the Spanish government and they said, we want to take it to you. It's like CAS, for example, but in Spain. They went to them and said, we don't think this is fair. We think we should have been allowed to register him. They have given Barcelona temporary dispensation to play both him and Pau Victor, who always gets forgotten, but he's in the same situation. So that meant that he could play in the Spanish Super Cup final, beat Real Madrid. But what it's done is kick the can down the road, because all it is it's a temporary dispensation until the case can be heard in full. Now, that could mean in a couple of months' time, say the start of April, when things really start moving with big competitions, the court could rule that he can't play anymore, and that his registration is null and void. So I think he still feels a debt to Barcelona. He wants to be a Barcelona player, but I think clubs will be keeping an eye on this, because I think this is a row that will run and run and run.
Barcelona, I mean, some of the things that they managed to get away with off the field is incredible, isn't it? So, yeah, Dani Olmo at the moment, that could be going their way. Right, there's some big Bayern Munich players who are out of contract in the summer. What's the latest on Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich? Might they be available?
So Kimmich is a really interesting one, because he's been such a huge player for Bayern in the last few years. I think he was really upset by how things went under Thomas Tuchel. I think he felt sidelined. He played a lot of right back. Sometimes he didn't play at all. He's quite an emotional guy, Kimmich. He feels it all. And I think he felt really out of sorts under Tuchel. It's changed under Kompany. Kompany's come in, made him a really central figure in his plans. However, still out of contract in the summer, still hasn't signed a new deal. There was an interview with him after the Gladbach game at the weekend, and he said, look, I'm a lot happier than I was, but I have to decide where can I be the most successful in the next few years of my career. So he's made no concrete statement at this stage. Now, I think it all bounces off each other, this, because Alphonso Davies, out of contract, similar situation, loving life under Kompany, a lot more receptive to Bayern than he has been, but Real Madrid waiting in the wings as well. But I think they're all looking at each other and thinking, well, if he signs, maybe I'll sign. And that's true of Jamal Musiala as well. He's not out of contract at the end of the year, but following year, and Bayern are getting a bit twitchy about it. They want him to sign. They see him as the face of Bayern going forwards. He's making positive noises, but nothing concrete yet.
Tell you what, Manchester United, Alphonso Davies, if he's available, we need a left
If he's
wing
up
back.
for it, if he fancies the challenge,
And there's
it's up to him, though. We'll have to give it a think, but yeah. I mean, these are the big signings, but I think that's a bit off Manchester United at the minute.
Yeah. Okay. 10 seconds. Enzo Lefebvre, Sunderland. Is that a big coup?
They're going to love him. They're going to absolutely love him. He's a brilliant player to watch, even though he's a diminutive player, gets his tackles in as well. That's a real coup for them. It'll be great.
They love him. We love you, Kev. Always great to have you here. King Kev on a Monday. Thank you, Molly, as well. Thank you to Flex and to Kwaku as well. Now, Good Morning Transfers back tomorrow, same time, same place, 9 o'clock in the morning. Same can be said for Transfer Talk. Midday tomorrow. Once again, we'll be getting around the grounds. And, of course, you've got 2 transfer shows tonight, 5 and 7. But following us right now, it is Lunchtime Live. We'll bring you an extended interview with the Manchester United captain, Bruno Fernandes.